What if the greatest loss of your life was not losing another person, but losing yourself? Not all at once, not through one tragic moment, but slowly, quietly, so quietly that you never realized it was happening. What if the person staring back at you in the mirror is not the person you came into this world as, but the person the world taught you to become? Think about it. Before anyone told you who you should be, before they taught you what success looked like, before they rewarded certain parts of you and rejected others, before you learned that approval felt safer than authenticity, who were you? Before the fear of being judged, before the need to impress, before comparison stole your peace, before rejection taught you to hide pieces of your heart, who were you before the world convinced you that you had to become someone else in order to be loved? The Vedas whisper a truth that has echoed through thousands of years. You were not born believing you were unworthy. You were not born ashamed of your emotions. You were not born comparing your life to everyone around you. You were not born carrying the exhausting burden of proving that you deserve to exist. You learned it. You learned to doubt yourself. You learned to perform. You learned to wear masks. You learned to silence your truth just to belong. And then one day you forgot that the masks were never your face. Perhaps that is why, no matter how much you achieve, something still feels missing. Why, even after receiving love, recognition, success, or approval, a quiet emptiness remains, a longing you cannot explain, a feeling that you have left something important behind. Because maybe what you miss is not your past. Maybe what you miss is the person you were before fear taught you to abandon yourself. The person who laughed without worrying how they sounded, who cried without shame, who wondered without embarrassment, who existed without asking permission, the person who knew how to simply be. And what if I told you that person was never destroyed? Life covered them with expectations. Pain buried them beneath protection. The world handed them identities that were never truly theirs, but they never disappeared. They have been waiting beneath every heartbreak, beneath every achievement, beneath every role you have played, watching you search for them in places they could never be found, through other people, through accomplishments, through endless becoming, patiently whispering, "I am still here." Tonight, we are not beginning a journey of self-improvement. We are not trying to become more impressive. We are not searching for another identity to wear. Tonight, we are doing something far more sacred. We are remembering the self that existed before fear, before shame, before comparison, before the world told you who to be. Because beneath the noise of your thoughts, beneath the stories you tell yourself, beneath every mask you learn to wear just to survive, someone has been waiting for you. The person you forgot. The person you have been searching for your entire life. The person you never truly lost. And if you stay with me until the end of this journey, you may discover that the peace you have been chasing, the love you have been trying to earn, and the freedom you believed lived somewhere in the future have been quietly living within you all along, waiting for you to finally come home. Before the world shaped you, you knew who you were. One of the greatest tragedies of human life is not that people fail. It is not that people suffer. It is not even that people lose their way. The greatest tragedy is that most people forget themselves so slowly that they never notice it happening. No one wakes up one morning and says, "Today I will abandon who I truly am." It happens quietly, almost invisibly, like dust slowly settling on a mirror. The mirror never stops being a mirror. It simply becomes harder to see your reflection. This forgetting begins in childhood, long before you understood the meaning of identity, long before you developed opinions about yourself, long before you knew words like success, failure, confidence, insecurity, or self-worth. You arrived in this world without titles, without labels, without the need to prove yourself. You were not worried about being impressive. You were not trying to be better than anyone else. You were not wondering if you were attractive enough, successful enough, talented enough, or important enough. You simply existed, and somehow that was enough. You looked at the world with wonder. You could spend hours watching rain fall outside a window. You could become fascinated by an insect crawling across the ground. You could laugh until your stomach hurt. You could cry openly when something hurt you. You did not hide your emotions because you had not yet learned that some emotions were considered acceptable and others were not. You danced because moving felt joyful. You asked questions because curiosity came naturally. You loved without calculating what you would receive in return. There was life flowing through you before self-consciousness interrupted it. There was a freedom inside you before fear entered the room. The ancient Vedic sages understood something many people forget. They believed that beneath all the layers of conditioning, every human being carries an original wholeness, not perfection, not endless happiness, but completeness, a state of being that does not depend on applause to feel valuable, a state that does not require comparison to feel worthy, a quiet knowing that says, "I exist, therefore I belong." Then the shaping began, slowly, almost lovingly. You were taught your name, then you were taught what that name was expected to become. You learned which behaviors earned praise. Good job. We're proud of you. That's exactly how you should behave. You also learned which behaviors brought disappointment. Don't cry. Don't be difficult. Be realistic. People won't like that. Without anyone intending harm, messages began entering your mind. Some emotions are welcome, others are inconvenient. Some dreams are encouraged, others are foolish. Some parts of you deserve attention, others should remain hidden. You discovered that approval often followed performance, and rejection often followed authenticity, so you adapted, because children must adapt. Children depend on belonging. You became observant. You learned to study faces. You noticed when someone's voice changed. You sensed disappointment before words were spoken. You learned how to become what people needed. You realized that being accepted felt safer than being fully seen. And perhaps without even realizing it, you made a silent agreement with the world. I will become whoever I need to become if it means I won't be abandoned. At first, these changes were small. You stopped asking certain questions. You pretended not to care about certain dreams. You laughed when something hurt. You hid parts of your personality. You silenced instincts that felt too different. You became easier to understand, easier to approve of, easier to love, piece by piece, day by day, year after year, until eventually, the performance became automatic. You no longer remembered what was performance and what was authentic. The mask no longer felt like a mask. It felt like you. This is why so many adults carry a sadness they cannot explain. They have successful careers, families, responsibilities, achievements. People around them may even admire them, yet deep inside, something feels missing. There is an emptiness they cannot describe. A quiet grief, a strange homesickness, not for a place, but for themselves, because somewhere deep inside, a forgotten part of them remembers what it felt like before the performance began. The world tells you that maturity means becoming someone important, building a reputation, accumulating accomplishments, strengthening the image you present to others. But the Vedas offer a completely different possibility. What if true maturity is not becoming? What if true maturity is remembering? Remembering what existed before fear taught you caution. Remembering what existed before comparison taught you inadequacy. Remembering what existed before ambition convinced you that your worth had to be earned. People spend decades trying to become enough, working harder, achieving more, collecting approval, yet the child they once were never questioned whether they deserved to exist. Somewhere along the way, innocence became insecurity, wonder became worry, presence became performance, and still, beneath all of it, something remains untouched. The Vedas describe this through the idea of Maya, the great illusion, not because the world itself is fake, but because our understanding of ourselves becomes distorted. We mistake temporary experiences for permanent truths. We mistake social conditioning for identity. We mistake survival strategies for our authentic self. We mistake the costume for the one wearing it. Imagine an actor stepping onto a stage. He plays the role of a king. He wears beautiful robes. He speaks with confidence. He becomes so convincing that everyone watching believes he truly is a king. But eventually the play ends. The crown is removed, the costume comes off, the actor remains. The tragedy begins when the actor forgets he was ever acting. This is what happens to many people. You become the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the perfectionist, the responsible one, the successful one, the disappointment, the invisible one, the strong one who never asks for help. You inherit identities shaped by circumstances. Then you spend your life protecting them, defending them, feeding them, terrified that without these roles you would not know who you are. But perhaps that fear reveals something important, because the real self does not require constant protection. It does not disappear when opinions change. It does not collapse when success fades. It does not vanish when people leave. It does not depend on applause. The deeper self simply witnesses, quietly, patiently, waiting beneath the noise. Many people think awakening means learning secret knowledge, practicing complicated rituals, having extraordinary experiences, but perhaps awakening begins much more simply. Perhaps awakening begins the moment you realize that you have spent your entire life searching for someone you never actually lost. Maybe that is why certain moments affect you so deeply. A sunset that silences your thoughts, music that unexpectedly brings tears to your eyes, the sound of rain late at night, the feeling of standing beneath a sky full of stars, holding the hand of someone you truly love, watching waves crash against the shore. For just a few moments, the performance stops, and something ancient stirs within you. You remember what it feels like to simply be. Without proving, without competing, without explaining, without becoming, you remember presence. And perhaps that is why this longing has followed you throughout your life. The longing you tried to satisfy through achievement, through relationships, through money, through recognition, through becoming more. Because what you truly miss cannot be bought. It cannot be earned. It cannot be given to you by another person. You are not searching for another accomplishment. You are searching for yourself. The version of you that existed before fear taught you to hide, before shame taught you silence, before the world handed you scripts and convinced you they were your identity. And this is the beautiful truth. You do not have to build that person from the beginning. You do not have to become worthy enough to meet them. You do not have to earn your way back, because they never left. Beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the stories you repeat about yourself, beneath the years spent forgetting, they remain exactly where they have always been, waiting, patient, whole, unbroken, still calling your name from somewhere deeper than memory. And perhaps the first step toward remembering who you truly are is finding the courage to admit that the person the world taught you to be may not be the person you came here to become. If that realization unsettles you, do not be afraid, because sometimes the most sacred journeys do not begin with discovering something new. Sometimes they begin with finally remembering what your soul has known since the very beginning. That before the world shaped you, before fear taught you to shrink, before approval became your compass, you already carried within you everything you needed to be whole, and the person you have been searching for all this time has been waiting inside you, patiently, to be remembered. The greatest illusion was believing the mask was you. There is a strange question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Who are you? Not your name, not your age, not your profession, not the story you tell strangers when they ask what you do. Who are you when everything you have attached yourself to is taken away? It sounds like a simple question, but if you sit with it honestly, it becomes one of the most unsettling questions a human being can ask, because most people do not know. From the moment we enter society, we begin collecting identities. I am the smart one. I am the quiet one. I am the responsible one. I am the successful one. I am the disappointment. I am the one who fixes everyone else's problems. I am the one nobody notices. These identities rarely arrive through conscious choice. They are formed through experiences, through praise, through criticism, through moments that leave emotional marks on the heart. A child who is praised for achievement learns that being productive earns love. A child constantly criticized may grow up believing they are never enough. A child forced to become independent too early may decide that needing others is dangerous. Slowly, identities form, and eventually, they stop feeling like stories. They begin to feel like facts. The Vedic sages noticed this thousands of years ago. They understood that the human mind has a tendency to mistake what it experiences for what it is. You feel fear, and suddenly you believe, I am a fearful person. You experience failure, and suddenly you believe, I am a failure. Someone abandons you, and suddenly you believe, I am unlovable. But experiences happen to you. They do not define you. Thoughts pass through you. They are not you. Emotions visit you. They are not your identity. Yet because these experiences feel deeply personal, we build entire lives around protecting the conclusions we drew from them. The Vedas describe this confusion as part of Maya, the great illusion. Not an illusion because life is meaningless, but because we mistake the temporary for the eternal. Imagine standing before a mirror every day. One morning, someone writes a sentence across the glass. You are not enough. At first you recognize it as writing on the mirror, but if you stare at it long enough, if enough people repeat it, if enough painful experiences reinforce it, eventually you forget the words are written on the surface. You begin to believe they are your reflection. This is how illusions become identities. Perhaps someone called you too sensitive, so you became emotionally guarded. Perhaps someone told you that you asked too many questions, so you learned silence. Perhaps you were praised only when you achieved something, so you became addicted to proving your worth. Perhaps your mistakes were met with shame instead of understanding, so perfection became your shield. Years pass, and without realizing it, you build an entire personality around survival. The mask protects you. It helps you belong. It helps you avoid pain. It helps you predict how others might respond. But eventually, the mask that once protected you begins to imprison you, because now you cannot remember where the mask ends and where you begin. The person who always appears strong no longer knows how to ask for help. The person who pleases everyone no longer knows what they truly want. The person who always achieves no longer knows how to rest without guilt. The person who never expresses emotion forgets how to feel alive. The identities that once helped you survive quietly begin stealing your freedom. This is why many people reach moments in life that seem confusing from the outside. They achieve everything they thought they wanted. The career, the recognition, the relationship, the financial security, and yet something still feels empty. They ask themselves, why am I not happy? I worked so hard to become this person, so why does it feel like I am living someone else's life? Because success cannot satisfy a self that has been forgotten. No amount of achievement can replace authenticity. No amount of applause can answer the question, who am I beneath all of this? Imagine an actor who spends years playing the same character. Every day he wears the same costume, speaks the same lines, repeats the same performance. The audience applauds. People admire him. Eventually he becomes famous for that role. Then one day someone asks him who he is without the character, and he realizes he does not know. He has played the role for so long that he has forgotten the person beneath it. This is the silent crisis many people experience. They are exhausted not because life is difficult, but because pretending is exhausting. Carrying identities that no longer fit is exhausting. Protecting images that do not reflect the truth of who you are is exhausting. The deepest fatigue often comes from trying to be someone you were never meant to remain. The Vedas offer a profound invitation. Instead of asking, what should I become? Ask, yandas. Arsikate, what have I mistaken myself to be? What beliefs about yourself were inherited? What identities were created out of fear? What roles are you continuing to perform simply because they once kept you safe? You may discover that much of what you defend so fiercely is not your essence. It is your conditioning. You may discover that beneath the achiever, there is a human being longing to rest. Beneath the caretaker, someone longing to be held. Beneath the perfectionist, someone terrified of rejection. Beneath the strong one, someone who has been carrying too much for too long. And beneath all of them, there is awareness, the silent witness, the part of you that has watched every chapter of your life unfold. It watched you as a child. It watched your heartbreaks. It watched your victories. It watched your fears. It witnessed every identity you have ever worn. Yet somehow, it remained unchanged. This witness does not grow older. It does not become more worthy through achievement. It does not become less worthy through failure. It simply observes, present, steady, whole. Perhaps this is why, in rare moments of stillness, you sense that there is more to you than your story. You realize that the voice in your head is being heard by something deeper. You realize that thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, roles appear and disappear, but something within you remains, something that cannot be reduced to labels, something untouched by praise or criticism, something the world could never define because it existed long before the world gave you a name. The greatest illusion was never that you wore masks. Masks are part of being human. The greatest illusion was believing that the mask was all you were, because you are not the fear. You are the awareness noticing the fear. You are not the role. You are the presence experiencing the role. You are not the story. You are the consciousness witnessing the story unfold. And perhaps freedom begins the moment you stop asking, "How can I become someone worthy?" and begin asking, "Who was I before I started believing I wasn't?" Because the answer you have been searching for may not exist somewhere in the future. It may be waiting beneath every false identity you have ever carried, patiently, quietly, like the sun hidden behind clouds, never absent, only forgotten. And maybe the journey of awakening is not about creating a new self at all. Maybe it is simply the courage to remove, one by one, every mask you mistook for your face, until all that remains is the truth of who you have always been. You abandoned your truth to earn the world's approval. One of the deepest wounds a human being can carry is not rejection from other people. It is rejection from themselves. It is the slow and painful process of learning to betray your own truth in exchange for belonging. Most people believe self-abandonment happens in dramatic moments. They imagine it looks like giving up on a dream overnight, walking away from everything they believe in, completely changing who they are. But that is rarely how it happens. Self-abandonment enters quietly. It hides inside ordinary moments, small choices, tiny compromises, the moments nobody notices. You want to express how you truly feel, but you remain silent because you do not want conflict. You disagree with something, but you smile and nod because you fear being disliked. You are exhausted, but you keep saying yes because you are afraid people will think you are selfish. You know something is hurting you, but you stay because leaving might disappoint someone. Again and again and again. At first it feels harmless, even noble. You call it kindness. You call it maturity. You call it sacrifice. You tell yourself, "It is not a big deal. I can handle it. My needs can wait. They matter more than I do." Until one day you wake up and realize something terrifying. You have become fluent in understanding everyone else's needs, but completely disconnected from your own. You know what other people expect from you. You know what keeps the peace. You know how to avoid disappointing others. But when someone asks, "What do you truly want?" you do not know how to answer, because somewhere along the way, you stopped asking yourself that question. The Vedas understood that one of the greatest powers of Maya is not simply illusion, it is identification. The moment you begin believing that your worth depends on acceptance, you hand other people the authority to define who you are. You begin shaping yourself around their expectations. You become who they admire, who they approve of, who they find useful, who they can understand. Slowly, your life stops being an expression of your truth and becomes a negotiation for love. Think about how early this begins. As children, approval feels like survival. When adults smile, we feel safe. When they withdraw affection, we feel fear. So we learn quickly, be good, be agreeable, be impressive, be useful. Do not be too emotional. Do not be too loud. Do not be too sensitive. Do not ask for too much. Do not take up too much space. Without realizing it, many people receive an invisible message: if you want love, become easier to love. So they begin editing themselves. They hide their anger. They silence their creativity. They suppress their sadness. They shrink their joy. They soften their opinions. They apologize for their needs. They become experts at being acceptable, and the world rewards them for it. People call them easygoing, responsible, reliable, selfless, strong. Yet behind closed doors, many of these same people feel exhausted, because pretending is exhausting. Living disconnected from yourself is exhausting. Being everything to everyone while becoming a stranger to yourself is exhausting. You begin to wonder why resentment keeps appearing in your heart, why small requests irritate you, why loneliness follows you even in crowded rooms, why life feels heavy despite doing everything right. Perhaps it is because the soul cannot thrive in a life built entirely around performance. You can receive praise, attention, validation, success, and still feel unseen, because people can only love the version of you that you allow them to meet. If the real you remains hidden, then no amount of love feels complete. This creates one of the most painful experiences in human life. You become loved for who you pretend to be, while secretly wondering if anyone would stay if they knew who you truly are. The Vedas invite us to ask a difficult question. What parts of yourself have you sacrificed in order to belong? What dreams have you abandoned because they seemed impractical? What truths have you swallowed because speaking them felt dangerous? What boundaries have you ignored because disappointing others felt unbearable? What parts of your soul have been waiting for your permission to exist again? Maybe you stopped dancing because someone laughed. Maybe you stopped creating because someone criticized you. Maybe you stopped speaking honestly because honesty once cost you connection. Maybe you stopped trusting yourself because someone convinced you that they knew better. But the deepest tragedy is not that other people misunderstood you. The deepest tragedy is when you begin participating in your own disappearance, when you become the one abandoning yourself. Because every time you ignore what your heart knows, every time you betray your inner truth, every time you silence your own needs, you send yourself a message. My truth is less important. My feelings do not matter. Who I really am is unacceptable. No wound cuts deeper than that. Yet this chapter is not about blame. It is about compassion. Because you learned these patterns for a reason. You were trying to stay connected. You were trying to stay safe. You were trying to avoid pain. The version of you that learned to please others was not weak. It was intelligent. It adapted. It survived. But survival strategies that protect us in childhood often imprison us in adulthood. The mask that once helped you belong eventually prevents you from being known. And there comes a moment in every awakening journey when you must ask yourself, how much of my life have I built around the fear of disappointing others? How many choices have I made because they reflected my truth? And how many because they protected me from rejection? The answers may break your heart, but they may also set you free, because awareness changes everything. The moment you notice the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it unconsciously. You begin hearing your own voice again, quietly at first, a whisper beneath years of conditioning. You realize you are allowed to rest, allowed to say no, allowed to change your mind, allowed to disappoint people, allowed to outgrow old versions of yourself, allowed to choose peace over performance. The Vedas remind us that truth is not something created. It is uncovered. It was always there beneath the fear, beneath the people-pleasing, beneath the endless search for approval. And perhaps this is what courage truly means, not becoming fearless, but choosing authenticity even when approval is uncertain, choosing honesty even when it feels uncomfortable, choosing alignment over acceptance, choosing your soul over the applause of strangers. Because the world will always have opinions. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people will leave. Some people will prefer the version of you that abandoned itself to make them comfortable. Let them. You were not born to spend your entire life earning permission to exist. You were not born to become smaller so others could remain comfortable. You were not born to perform your way into worthiness. The truth is this: the people who truly belong in your life may not love every decision you make, but they will never require you to betray your soul in order to earn their love. And perhaps the most sacred promise you can make to yourself is this: I will stop abandoning myself to avoid being abandoned by others. I will stop negotiating my truth for temporary acceptance. I will stop asking the world for permission to become who I already am, because the approval you have been searching for your entire life cannot heal the pain created by your own self-rejection. The love you seek from others begins with the love that says, I will not leave myself anymore. And maybe that is what returning to yourself truly means. Not becoming someone new, but finally choosing to stand beside the person within you who has spent years waiting, hoping, praying that one day you would choose them too. You abandoned your truth to earn the world's approval. There is a pain that many people carry without ever giving it a name. It does not come from losing money. It does not come from failure. It does not even come from heartbreak. It comes from the quiet realization that somewhere along the way, you stopped being loyal to yourself. You learned how to understand everyone else's emotions while ignoring your own. You became an expert at sensing what people needed from you. You knew how to make others comfortable, how to avoid conflict, how to keep the peace, how to become what everyone expected you to be. But in the process, you forgot how to ask one simple question: what do I truly feel? What do I truly want? What does my soul actually need? This forgetting rarely happens all at once. No one wakes up one morning and says, today I will betray my own heart. It happens slowly, quietly, in moments so small that they hardly seem important. You laugh at jokes you do not find funny. You agree with opinions you do not believe. You stay silent when something hurts you. You apologize for things that were never your fault. You say yes when every part of you wants to say no. You convince yourself that your needs can wait. Just this once, then again, and again, and again, until your entire life becomes built around one invisible question: what must I do to be accepted? The need for approval is one of the strongest forces shaping human behavior, because as children, acceptance feels like survival. To belong means safety. To be rejected feels dangerous. So we adapt. We study the people around us. We observe what earns love. We notice what causes disappointment. We become students of approval. Perhaps you learned that being quiet earned praise, so you stopped expressing your opinions. Perhaps you learned that being useful made people appreciate you, so you became responsible for everyone's happiness. Perhaps you discovered that achievement brought attention, so your worth became tied to performance. Perhaps you realized that expressing sadness made others uncomfortable, so you taught yourself how to suffer in silence. Children do not ask, is this healthy? They ask, what must I become so I can continue to be loved? And because children are incredibly intelligent, they adapt beautifully. The problem is that the version of you created for survival often follows you into adulthood. The child who feared disappointing others becomes the adult who cannot set boundaries. The child who learned to earn love through achievement becomes the adult who never feels successful enough. The child who had to suppress emotions becomes the adult who feels disconnected from their own heart. The child who became everyone's source of strength becomes the adult who secretly wonders who will be strong for them. You carry old survival strategies into new chapters of life, and eventually those strategies become identities. You no longer notice that you are performing. You simply call it your personality. People describe you as selfless, easygoing, reliable, strong, independent, understanding, but deep inside, you may feel exhausted. Because there is a difference between kindness and self-abandonment. There is a difference between compassion and people-pleasing. There is a difference between generosity and sacrificing your soul. The world often praises those who ignore themselves. The person who never complains, the person who always says yes, the person who gives endlessly, the person who expects nothing. But the Vedas gently remind us that truth cannot grow in a life built upon denial. How can you know yourself if you never listen to yourself? How can you honor your truth if you have spent years silencing it? How can you walk your path if every decision is guided by the fear of disappointing others? One of the most heartbreaking realities of human life is this: you can spend your entire existence becoming everything people wanted and still feel unseen, because people can only connect with the version of you they have been allowed to meet. If your authentic self remains hidden, then even love begins to feel lonely. People say they love you, but a part of you wonders, if they knew who I really was, would they still stay? You receive compliments, but they do not reach your heart because they are directed toward the mask, not the person behind it. You achieve success, yet it feels strangely empty because the one receiving recognition is not the version of you longing to be known. This is why so many people feel isolated, despite being surrounded by others. They have mastered the art of being accepted, but forgotten the art of being authentic. The Vedas invite us into a different kind of courage, not the courage to conquer the world, but the courage to stop abandoning ourselves, the courage to tell the truth about what hurts, the courage to acknowledge what no longer aligns with our soul, the courage to disappoint people when necessary, the courage to choose inner honesty over external approval. Because every time you betray your truth, something inside you notices. Every time you ignore your intuition, something inside you grieves. Every time you silence your needs, something inside you whispers, "Please do not leave me again." Perhaps that is why so many people experience unexplained sadness, not because they have lost someone else, but because they have lost touch with themselves. The soul knows when it has been abandoned. The heart remembers every promise broken in the name of acceptance. It remembers every dream dismissed, every boundary ignored, every tear hidden, every truth swallowed. And eventually, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. Resentment appears, exhaustion deepens, anxiety increases, joy becomes distant, life begins to feel heavy, not because you are weak, but because carrying a false version of yourself is exhausting. Pretending is exhausting. Seeking approval is exhausting. Living according to expectations that do not belong to you is exhausting. You were never designed to spend your life performing. You were never meant to earn your right to exist. You were never created to become smaller so others could remain comfortable. The Vedas teach that beneath all conditioning exists something untouched, a deeper self, a truer self, a silent witness that has observed every version of you. The child desperate for approval, the teenager struggling to fit in, the adult trying to hold everything together, the achiever, the caretaker, the people pleaser, the perfectionist. It has watched them all, and still it remains unchanged, patient, waiting. It does not judge the versions of you that learned to survive. It understands why they were created. It understands your fear, your loneliness, your longing to belong. It simply waits for the moment you become ready to come home. Perhaps that moment begins with a simple realization: you cannot find peace by abandoning yourself. You cannot experience authentic love while hiding your authentic heart. You cannot discover who you truly are while constantly asking others who they need you to be. There comes a point in every awakening journey when you must choose. Will you continue seeking acceptance at the cost of your soul? Or will you risk being misunderstood in order to become real? The answer is not easy, because authenticity has a price. Some people may not understand your growth. Some relationships may change. Some versions of your life may no longer fit. But there is another price that is far greater. The price of living your entire life as a stranger to yourself. The price of reaching the end of your journey and realizing you never truly lived as the person you came here to be. And perhaps this is the sacred promise your soul has been waiting to hear. I will stop apologizing for existing. I will stop abandoning my truth for temporary approval. I will stop negotiating my worth through the opinions of others. I will honor what my heart knows. I will trust the quiet voice within me. I will choose authenticity even when acceptance is uncertain. because the love I have spent my entire life searching for begins with refusing to leave myself behind. Maybe awakening is not learning how to become extraordinary. Maybe it is simply remembering that your soul was never asking you to impress the world. It was only asking you to be true. And perhaps the greatest act of love is not convincing others to choose you. Perhaps it is finally becoming the person who says to the frightened parts within, "You no longer have to earn your place here. You no longer have to perform. You no longer have to hide. I see you. I accept you. I choose you. And this time, no matter who stays, no matter who leaves, I will not abandon myself again." The voice of your soul grew quiet beneath the noise of the world. There is a voice inside you that has been speaking for your entire life. Not the voice that worries, not the voice that compares, not the voice that criticizes every mistake you make, not the restless stream of thoughts that follows you from morning until night. There is another voice, quieter, softer, older, a voice that does not shout, a voice that does not force, a voice that has never stopped guiding you. Most people spend their entire lives searching for answers outside themselves because they have forgotten how to hear that voice within. They ask everyone else what they should do. They search for experts. They seek approval. They follow trends. They copy the lives of people they admire. They consume endless advice about happiness, success, relationships, purpose, and meaning. Yet beneath all the noise, there remains a simple truth. Part of you already knows. Part of you has always known. The tragedy is not that the voice disappeared. The tragedy is that the world became so loud that you stopped listening. Think about how life moves now. The moment you wake up, the noise begins. Notifications, messages, news, opinions, deadlines, expectations, voices competing for your attention. Everyone seems certain they know how you should live, how you should look, how much money you should earn, what your body should resemble, what success should mean, who you should love, what dreams are practical, what beliefs are acceptable, what version of yourself deserves admiration. The world constantly tells you who to become, and if you are not careful, you begin confusing all of those voices with your own. You stop asking, "What feels true to me?" and begin asking, "What will people approve of? What will make me successful? What will make me admired? What will keep me safe?" Slowly, almost without noticing, you lose your relationship with your inner knowing. The Vedic sages understood this deeply. They observed that the mind is easily pulled outward, always chasing, always reacting, always seeking fulfillment through the next achievement, the next possession, the next relationship, the next destination. The senses become restless, the mind becomes noisy, and in all that movement, the quiet wisdom within becomes difficult to hear, not because it has gone away, but because silence has become unfamiliar. For many people, silence feels uncomfortable. The moment the television turns off, the music stops, the conversations end, the phone is placed down, anxiety begins to rise. People immediately reach for distraction. Another video, another conversation, another task, another scroll through endless information, because stillness forces us to encounter ourselves. And many people fear what they might find. They fear unresolved grief, unanswered questions, unhealed wounds, loneliness, regret. But perhaps what they fear even more is hearing the truth they have spent years avoiding, the truth that whispers, "This path is not yours. This relationship is hurting you. This success is costing you your soul. You are pretending to be okay. You already know what needs to change." Deep down, most people know. They know when they are betraying themselves. They know when they are settling. They know when fear is making decisions on their behalf. They know when something no longer aligns with who they truly are. Yet they keep moving, keep distracting, keep postponing the conversation, because truth can be inconvenient. Truth asks things of us. Truth requires courage. The voice of the soul rarely tells you what is easiest. It tells you what is real. It invites you toward authenticity. It calls you toward wholeness. And that journey often requires letting go of familiar illusions. Think back to moments in your own life, moments when you ignored your intuition. Perhaps you knew someone was not right for you, but you stayed. Perhaps you sensed a dream calling your name, but fear convinced you to abandon it. Perhaps your body was exhausted, but you pushed yourself harder. Perhaps your heart knew something needed to end, but you clung to what was comfortable. Have you noticed something remarkable? Even when you ignored that quiet knowing, it remained patient, steady, waiting. You may have silenced it, doubted it, questioned it, but it never stopped speaking. Because your soul does not punish you for forgetting. It simply continues calling you home. The Vedas teach that beneath the restless movements of the mind exists a deeper awareness, a witnessing presence, unmoved by the storms of thought, untouched by temporary emotions, whole and complete. The mind is like the surface of an ocean, always changing, always moving. Waves rise, waves crash, waves disappear. Some days the ocean is calm, other days it is violent. But beneath the surface, the depths remain still. Your thoughts are the waves. Your awareness is the depth. Most people spend their lives trying to control the waves, fighting every thought, arguing with every emotion, panicking whenever fear appears. But the Vedic invitation is different. Instead of becoming trapped in the waves, remember the depth. Remember the part of you capable of witnessing without being consumed. Because you are not every thought you think. You are not every fear you experience. You are not every anxious prediction your mind creates. Thoughts come, thoughts go, emotions rise, emotions fall. But awareness remains. The problem is that modern life teaches constant distraction. We become addicted to stimulation, busy schedules, endless entertainment. The next goal, the next purchase, the next milestone. We fill every empty space until we forget that emptiness itself can be sacred. There is wisdom in pauses, wisdom in stillness, wisdom in sitting quietly beneath the stars, wisdom in watching rain fall without reaching for your phone, wisdom in walking without needing noise in your ears, wisdom in simply breathing and allowing yourself to exist without productivity, because in those moments, something extraordinary happens. You begin hearing yourself again. At first, the voice is faint. You may not trust it. Years of conditioning have taught you to doubt your own knowing. But gradually you remember. You remember what peace feels like. You remember what drains your spirit. You remember what brings you alive. You remember what your heart has been trying to tell you. Perhaps this is why certain experiences move us so deeply. A sunrise, a quiet forest, a candle flickering in darkness, the sound of waves meeting the shore, holding someone you love, looking into the eyes of a child, standing beneath a sky filled with stars. In these moments, the noise falls away. The mind stops demanding. The performance pauses, and suddenly, you remember. Life was never meant to be lived entirely in your head. You were never meant to be a machine producing achievements. You were never meant to spend every moment proving your worth. You came here to experience, to feel, to awaken, to remember. The voice of your soul has been waiting beneath the noise of your becoming, waiting beneath the pressure to perform, waiting beneath the expectations you carry, waiting beneath the fear of disappointing others. It has never demanded perfection. It has never asked you to become someone extraordinary. It has only asked for your attention, your honesty, your willingness to listen. And perhaps the reason you found this message tonight is not an accident. Perhaps you have grown tired of the noise, tired of pretending, tired of searching everywhere except within. Perhaps something inside you is ready to stop running, ready to sit in silence long enough to hear what has always been there. Because the answers you seek may not exist in another achievement, another relationship, another possession, another identity. Perhaps the wisdom you have been searching for has been whispering inside you all along, softly, patiently, loving you enough to wait. And maybe awakening begins not when the soul finally speaks, But when you finally become quiet enough to hear it, because beneath the opinions of the world, beneath the endless chatter of the mind, beneath the fears that tell you who you should be, there remains a voice older than your conditioning, older than your wounds, older than your fears, the voice of the self you forgot, the self that has never stopped loving you, the self that has never stopped believing in you, the self that has been waiting through every distraction, every heartbreak, every season of forgetting, still whispering the same invitation: come back, slow down. Ahasor Siktoba. Listen, you do not have to search any farther. The truth you seek has been within you since the beginning, and it has been patiently waiting for you to remember how to hear it once again. The ego convinced you that the mask was your real face. There is a prison that most people spend their entire lives inside without ever realizing it exists. It has no walls, no locked doors, no chains around the hands. From the outside, people living inside this prison often appear successful. They smile, they work, they build careers, they raise families, they chase dreams, they laugh at gatherings, they post moments of happiness, they continue moving through life exactly as everyone expects. And yet, deep inside, many of them carry a quiet fear, a fear they rarely speak about, a fear they barely understand. The fear of being seen without the mask, because after wearing it for so long, they no longer know where the mask ends and where they begin. The Vedic sages gave this prison many names, but one of the most powerful understandings they shared was this: the ego is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. The ego itself is not evil. It is not something to hate. It is not an enemy that must be destroyed. The ego was born from necessity. It developed to help you navigate the human experience. It created a sense of I. It helped you survive. It allowed you to function in the world. Without it, you would not know your own name. You would not recognize your responsibilities. You would not understand your role in society. But somewhere along the journey, something happened. The servant climbed onto the throne, and the mask convinced you that it was your true face. The ego began whispering stories, stories about who you are, stories about who you should be, stories about what you must achieve to become worthy. And because these stories repeated themselves for years, you stopped questioning them. You simply accepted them as truth. I am only valuable if I succeed. I am only lovable if people approve of me. I must never fail. I must always appear strong. I cannot let people see my weakness. I am my reputation. I am my achievements. I am my mistakes. I am what happened to me. These stories become identities, and identities become prisons. The strange thing about prisons built by the ego is that they often feel safe. The familiar feels secure, even if it hurts, even if it limits you, even if it slowly suffocates your spirit. Because certainty, even painful certainty, often feels less frightening than the unknown. Imagine someone who has believed for 20 years that they are not good enough. That belief becomes familiar, predictable. They know how to move through life carrying it. They know how to protect themselves from disappointment. But if someone asks them to let go of that belief, they panic, because who would they be without it? Imagine someone who has built their identity around being the strong one. The one who never breaks, the one everyone depends on, the one who always has the answers. What happens when life asks them to admit they are tired, to ask for help, to confess that they are hurting? The ego resists because it whispers, if you stop being this person, you will lose who you are. Imagine someone whose entire worth comes from achievement. They chase success relentlessly, one accomplishment after another, one goal after another, one mountain after another, yet no victory ever feels like enough. Because the ego immediately moves the finish line. You need more. You should have done better. You still have something to prove. The prison expands, but freedom never arrives. This is why so many people achieve everything they once dreamed of and still feel empty, because the ego cannot be satisfied through external victories. It survives by convincing you that fulfillment exists just beyond the next achievement, the next relationship, the next promotion. the next possession, the next version of yourself. It says, when I finally become this person, then I will be enough. But enough never comes, because the ego's deepest fear is not failure. Its deepest fear is irrelevance. It fears disappearing. It fears surrender. It fears the possibility that your worth has never depended on the stories it created. The Vedas understood this long ago. They observed that suffering often arises not from life itself, but from attachment. Attachment to identities, attachment to outcomes, attachment to the image we have created of ourselves. You become attached to being successful, then failure destroys you. You become attached to being admired, then criticism breaks you. You become attached to always being needed, then being overlooked wounds you. You become attached to being right. Then disagreement feels threatening. The tighter your attachment becomes, the more fragile your peace becomes, because anything the ego builds can be shaken by circumstances. Beauty changes, bodies age, wealth rises and falls, relationships evolve, people misunderstand you. The world moves in ways you cannot control. If your identity depends entirely on temporary things, then your sense of self becomes temporary too. And this is exhausting. Exhausting to maintain, exhausting to defend, exhausting to protect. How much energy have you spent trying to uphold an image? Trying to appear fine when you were hurting? Trying to seem confident when you felt uncertain? Trying to be perfect because mistakes felt unacceptable? Trying to become someone worthy of love? The ego says, hide your flaws, control how people see you, never let them know you're struggling, protect the image at all costs. But beneath all of that effort, your soul quietly asks a different question. What if you no longer had to pretend? What if being human was not something to hide? What if your worth existed before the image, before the accomplishments, before the approval, before the mask? The Vedas teach that beneath the ego exists something deeper, the witnessing self, the awareness that observes every role you play. It watched you as a child. It watched you become a teenager. It watched you succeed. It watched you fail. It watched you fall in love. It watched you lose people you thought you could never live without. It watched you cry when nobody was around. It witnessed every version of you, yet somehow it remained unchanged. The achiever came and went. The wounded one came and went. The fearful one came and went. The confident one came and went. The roles changed. The awareness remained. This awareness does not need to prove itself. It does not compete. It does not compare. It does not panic when life changes. It simply is, like the sky watching clouds pass across it. Clouds arrive. Clouds disappear. Storms gather. Storms fade. The sky remains untouched. Your thoughts are clouds. Your identities are clouds. Your fears are clouds. Your achievements are clouds. Your awareness is the sky. But most people spend their lives trying to control the clouds while forgetting the sky they truly are. Perhaps this is why awakening can feel so frightening. Because awakening asks you to release old certainties, to question the stories you have believed about yourself, to loosen your grip on identities that once kept you safe. The ego interprets this as death. It whispers, you are losing yourself. But something deeper knows the truth. You are not losing yourself. You are losing what you were never meant to carry forever. You are not destroying your identity. You are remembering that you are more than any identity. You are not becoming empty. You are becoming spacious enough to contain every part of your humanity without mistaking any single part for the whole of who you are. And maybe this is the real meaning of freedom, not having no responsibilities, not escaping the world, not rejecting your human experience, but moving through life without forgetting what lies beneath it all, playing your roles without becoming imprisoned by them, being a parent without losing yourself in parenthood, being successful without worshipping success, being loved without depending on love to define your worth, being human without forgetting your deeper nature. The mask was never the enemy. The problem began when you forgot you were wearing one. The actor can enjoy the play. The actor can fully embody the role. The actor can laugh and cry and love through the character. But freedom remains only when the actor remembers, I am not only this. Perhaps tonight, after years of carrying identities that have grown heavy, after years of defending versions of yourself built from fear, you can allow yourself to loosen your grip. You do not have to prove anything. You do not have to earn the right to exist. You do not have to become extraordinary before you deserve peace. You do not have to protect every story you have ever told about yourself. Because beneath the masks, beneath the achievements, beneath the failures, beneath the fear, there remains something untouched. Something whole, something ancient, something real. The self that existed before the world taught you who to be. The self that has patiently watched every chapter of your becoming. The self that has never measured your worth through perfection. The self that has never stopped loving you. And perhaps awakening begins the moment you stop asking, who must I become to finally be enough? And begin asking, what remains when I no longer believe the stories fear taught me about myself? Because maybe the greatest illusion was never that you wore a mask. Maybe the greatest illusion was believing that the mask was all you were. And maybe the greatest freedom you will ever experience is finally having the courage to remove it and discover that beneath everything you feared losing, you were already whole. The moment you remember who you are, the world loses its power to defy you. There comes a moment in every awakening journey that changes everything. It does not arrive with thunder. It does not announce itself through dramatic visions or extraordinary experiences. Most of the time, it arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. It comes in the middle of an ordinary day, perhaps while sitting alone after everyone has gone to sleep, perhaps while watching the sun disappear beneath the horizon, perhaps after another disappointment that finally forces you to stop running, perhaps after losing something you thought you could never survive without, and suddenly a question rises from somewhere deep within you. What if I have spent my entire life trying to become someone I was never meant to be? At first, the question feels frightening, because so much of your identity has been built around what the world taught you, its definitions, its expectations, its measurements of success, its ideas of what makes a person valuable. From the moment you entered this world, people began handing you instructions. This is who you should become. This is how you should behave. This is what people will admire. This is what people will reject. This is what a successful life looks like. This is what love should feel like. This is what happiness means. And because everyone around you seemed to believe these things, you rarely questioned them. You simply followed the path. Study hard, work harder, prove yourself, gain approval, accumulate achievements, earn recognition, build an identity that others respect. And perhaps you did. Perhaps you checked every box. Perhaps you became everything you were told would make you complete. And yet, something inside you remained restless, because the soul cannot be satisfied by becoming someone it was never meant to be. The Vedas remind us of a truth that feels both liberating and unsettling. The world can teach you many things, but it cannot tell you who you are. It can give you a name, but not your essence. It can assign you roles, but not your identity. It can shape your personality, but it cannot touch the deepest part of your being. That part existed long before anyone had an opinion about you, long before praise inflated your ego, long before criticism wounded your heart, long before success made you proud, long before failure made you doubt yourself. It existed before all of it, and remembering this changes everything. Because when you truly remember who you are, the opinions of the world begin to lose their power. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop worshipping. You stop treating approval as proof of your worth. You stop allowing criticism to define your value. You stop making strangers responsible for your identity. You stop handing pieces of your soul to people who cannot see your wholeness. For the first time, you realize something extraordinary. You do not have to convince everyone to understand you. You do not have to explain every choice you make. You do not have to defend your growth. You do not have to shrink yourself so others remain comfortable. You do not have to betray your truth to maintain acceptance. You become free, not because the world changes, but because your relationship with the world changes. The Vedas never taught detachment as indifference. They taught freedom from dependence. You can love people deeply without losing yourself inside them. You can pursue success without making it your identity. You can enjoy praise without becoming addicted to it. You can hear criticism without allowing it to destroy you. You can experience loss without forgetting your wholeness. You can participate fully in life without becoming imprisoned by it. Imagine carrying a cup of water through a storm. If you believe the water is your entire existence, every movement terrifies you, every shake feels catastrophic, every drop lost feels unbearable. But if you remember that the ocean lives within you, the fear begins to soften. The world no longer has the power to convince you that temporary circumstances determine your worth. Because you know what is temporary and you know what is eternal, this remembrance changes how you love. You stop begging people to choose you. You stop chasing those determined to misunderstand you. You stop sacrificing your peace to avoid being alone. You realize that love rooted in fear is not love. It is attachment. True love does not ask you to abandon yourself. True love does not require you to become smaller. True love allows authenticity to breathe. This remembrance changes how you work. You no longer build your life solely around proving your value. You still strive, you still create, you still contribute, but achievement becomes an expression of who you are, not evidence that you deserve to exist. This remembrance changes how you face failure. Failure no longer becomes a verdict on your worth. It becomes experience, feedback, a chapter, not the entire story. Because you understand that your essence remains untouched by outcomes, this remembrance changes how you experience pain. Heartbreak still hurts. Loss still wounds. Disappointment still arrives. You do not become emotionless. You become rooted. You learn that pain can move through you without becoming your identity. You can grieve without believing you are broken. You can struggle without believing you are unworthy. You can fall without forgetting who you are. The world teaches you to build your life from the outside in. The Vedas invite you to live from the inside out. The world says, become someone impressive, and then you will find peace. The Vedas whisper, remember your peace, and then everything you do will carry its fragrance. The world says, earn your worth. The Vedas whisper, you were born with it. The world says, compete for significance. The Vedas whisper, you already belong. And perhaps this is why awakening often feels like returning home, not because you discover something new, but because you finally stop arguing with what your soul has always known. You stop searching for mirrors in other people's eyes. You stop asking the world to answer questions only your heart can understand. You stop trying to become enough, because for the first time you realize that enoughness was never something to achieve, it was something to remember. There will still be difficult days, days when old fears return, days when insecurity whispers familiar lies, days when the need for approval rises again. Awakening does not make you superhuman. It makes you conscious. You notice the old patterns without becoming trapped inside them. You hear fear without obeying it. You witness the ego without surrendering to its stories. You return to yourself again and again. This is the practice. This is the path. Not perfection, remembrance. And slowly, your entire life begins to change. Not because you become someone else, but because you stop pretending to be someone you are not. You laugh more freely, you speak more honestly, you rest without guilt, you create without seeking applause. You love without losing yourself. You walk through life carrying a quiet confidence that cannot be manufactured, because it is no longer built upon comparison. It is built upon truth. You finally understand that the world may misunderstand you. People may project their fears onto you. Some may celebrate your growth, others may resist it. Some may leave because the version of you they preferred no longer exists. Let them. You were never born to be everyone's expectation. You were never born to become a reflection of other people's comfort. You were never born to spend your life earning permission to exist. You were born to remember, to awaken, to embody the truth that has waited patiently beneath every role you have ever played. And perhaps the greatest freedom a human being can experience is this: to walk through a world filled with opinions, without forgetting the voice of their own soul, to stand in the presence of praise without becoming inflated, to stand in the presence of criticism without becoming diminished, to lose what can be lost without losing themselves, because the moment you truly remember who you are, the world loses its power to tell you who you must become, and what remains is something simple, something ancient, something unshakable, a quiet knowing deep within your heart: I do not need to become worthy. I do not need to earn my place here. I do not need to prove that I deserve to exist. I already belong to life. I already carry what I have been searching for. I already am what I have spent years trying to become. And perhaps that remembrance is the beginning of true freedom. The freedom to finally live, not as the person the world demanded you to be, but as the soul you have always been beneath it all. You were never meant to become someone else, only to remember who you have always been. If you have listened this far, perhaps you have begun to notice something. Maybe the ache you have carried for years was never random. Maybe the restlessness you could not explain had a purpose. Maybe the feeling that something was missing from your life was not a sign that you needed more success, more recognition, more possessions, or more approval. Maybe it was a sign that you had drifted too far away from yourself, because there is a longing that lives inside every human being, a longing that no achievement can completely satisfy, a longing that no relationship can permanently silence, a longing that follows us through every season of life. As children, we believe the answer lies in becoming older. As teenagers, we believe it lies in being accepted. As adults, we believe it lies in accomplishment. We tell ourselves, when I find the right person, I will finally feel complete. When I become successful, I will finally relax. When I have enough money, enough recognition, enough security, then I will be at peace. So we spend years chasing, years becoming, years searching, always moving towards some future version of ourselves that promises fulfillment. Yet many people eventually arrive at the place they once dreamed about, and they discover something unexpected. The emptiness remains. The longing remains. The questions remain. Because perhaps the soul was never searching for something outside itself. Perhaps it was searching for home. The Vedas offer a truth so simple that the mind often overlooks it. You are not here to become worthy. You are here to remember that you already are. You are not here to create your deepest self. You are here to uncover it. You are not here to transform into someone entirely different. You are here to remove everything that made you forget. The fear, the conditioning, the masks, the borrowed beliefs, the stories that convinced you that love had to be earned, the identities that taught you your value depended on performance, the illusions that made you believe you were separate from the wholeness you have always carried within you. Think about how much energy human beings spend trying to become more attractive, become more successful, become more admired, become more intelligent, become more spiritual, become more productive, become someone. And perhaps the question is not, what must I become? Perhaps the question is, what have I forgotten? What if the peace you seek is not waiting in the future? What if the love you seek is not something you need to chase? What if the wisdom you seek is not hidden in distant places? What if what you have been looking for has quietly existed beneath the noise all along? The Vedic sages compared this forgetting to clouds covering the sun. The clouds may block your vision, they may darken the sky, they may convince you that the light has disappeared, but the sun never stops shining. It remains exactly where it has always been, unaffected, whole, patient. The same is true for you. Life may have covered your truth with fear. Heartbreak may have taught you to close your heart. Failure may have convinced you that you are not enough. Rejection may have made you question your worth. Pain may have caused you to build walls. The world may have handed you identities that never truly belonged to you. But beneath all of it, your essence remains untouched. You are not broken, you are buried. And there is a difference. Broken things must be repaired. Buried things must be uncovered. This means that awakening is not about fixing yourself. It is about remembering yourself. The person you were before shame taught you to hide, before fear taught you to shrink, before approval became your compass, before you learned to perform for love, before the world convinced you that who you naturally were was somehow not enough. That person still exists, not in the past, not in memory, but within you. Even now, there are moments when you have already felt their presence, moments when you forgot to perform, when you laughed without self-consciousness, when you stood beneath a sky full of stars and felt small yet deeply connected to everything, when music moved through your heart and tears appeared without explanation, when you watched the ocean and forgot all the identities you carried, when you held someone you loved and remembered what truly mattered, when you sat alone in silence and sensed that beneath all your thoughts there was peace. These moments are not accidents, they are reminders. Life constantly leaves breadcrumbs leading you back to yourself. The problem is that we often ignore them. We return to distraction, to busyness, to proving, to becoming, because remembering requires surrender. It asks you to release the stories you have clung to for safety. It asks you to let old identities die. It asks you to trust that you are more than what fear has taught you to believe. This can feel terrifying because the ego asks, who will I be without these stories? Without the mask of perfection? Without the identity built around success? Without the need for approval? Without the pain that has become familiar? But the soul asks a different question. Who might you become if you stopped carrying what was never truly you? Perhaps this is why spiritual awakening often feels less like discovering something new and more like remembering something ancient. You hear words you have never heard before, yet something inside whispers, I already knew this. You encounter wisdom that feels strangely familiar, not because you learned it recently, but because your soul recognizes its own reflection. A deep knowing awakens. A knowing beyond logic, beyond explanation. A knowing that says, you have been here before. You have always known. You only forgot. And maybe that is the hidden purpose of this human experience, not to spend an entire lifetime proving your worth, not to collect identities until you forget who you are, not to endlessly chase a version of yourself that promises fulfillment, but to remember your wholeness in a world that profits from your insecurity, to remember your enoughness in a world that teaches inadequacy, to remember your inner wisdom in a world overflowing with noise, to remember love in a world shaped by fear, to remember your connection in a world obsessed with separation, to remember your soul in a world distracted by appearances. This remembering changes everything. You stop rushing through life as if your worth is waiting at the finish line. You stop treating yourself like a project that constantly needs improvement. You stop speaking to yourself with cruelty. You stop seeing your humanity as a problem to solve. Instead, you begin meeting yourself with compassion. You become gentler with your imperfections. You allow yourself to rest, to breathe, to feel, to begin again. You stop asking life to make you complete, because completeness was never missing. It was forgotten, and perhaps one day, many years from now, you will look back on your life and realize that the most important journey you ever took was invisible. It was not measured in miles. It was not celebrated by the world. There were no trophies waiting at the end. It was the journey back to yourself, the journey of removing every false identity, every borrowed belief, every fear that told you to become smaller, until all that remained was truth. Simple, quiet, sacred, the truth that existed before the world gave you a name, before it told you who to be, before it taught you what to fear. The truth that has loved you through every season of forgetting. The truth that has waited patiently beneath every mistake, every heartbreak, every success, and every failure. The truth that whispers even now, You do not have to become someone else. You do not have to earn what has always been yours. You do not have to spend another day searching outside for what lives within. Come home. Come back. Remember, because the person you have been chasing through every achievement, the peace you have been seeking through every relationship, the love you have been trying to earn from the world, the freedom you have imagined living somewhere in the future, has been waiting quietly within you all along. Not lost, not broken, not absent, only forgotten. And perhaps the greatest miracle of all is this: after everything life has asked you to carry, after every role you have played, after every mask you have worn, after every season you spent believing you were not enough, you still have the ability to remember. You still have the ability to return. You still have the ability to choose truth over fear. And tonight, if your soul recognizes these words, let this be the moment you stop searching for permission to exist. Let this be the moment you release the exhausting burden of becoming. Let this be the moment you finally understand you were never meant to become someone else. You were only ever meant to remember who you have always been. And the self you forgot, the self that has waited patiently beneath every layer of conditioning, has never stopped waiting for you to come home. And perhaps this is the truth your soul has been trying to remember all along. You were never born to spend your entire life becoming someone the world would approve of. You were never meant to measure your worth through achievements, titles, appearances, or the opinions of people who were also trying to remember who they are. You were never meant to carry masks so heavy that you forgot the face beneath them. Before the world told you what success looked like, before fear taught you to hide, before rejection convinced you that love had to be earned, before comparison made you question your value, there was you, whole, present, unafraid to exist, a quiet awareness untouched by praise or criticism, a sacred part of you that knew how to love, wonder, trust, and simply be. Life may have covered that truth with noise. Pain may have buried it beneath layers of protection. The world may have handed you stories that never belonged to you, but the deepest part of you remained unchanged, patiently waiting, watching every chapter of your life unfold, watching you search through relationships, achievements, possessions, identities, and endless becoming, hoping that one day you would stop searching everywhere else and finally turn inward. Because the person you have been missing was never left behind in childhood. They were never destroyed by heartbreak. They were never erased by failure. They were never lost in the chaos of the world. They have been with you through every disappointment, through every mistake, through every lonely night, through every season of forgetting, quietly whispering, "I am still here." Maybe awakening is not reaching some distant destination. Maybe enlightenment is not becoming extraordinary. Maybe freedom is not escaping the world. Maybe the most sacred journey a human being can take is simply this: to remember that you do not have to earn your right to exist. To remember that your worth was never something the world had the power to give or take away. To remember that beneath every role you play, beneath every fear you carry, beneath every identity you defend, there is a self untouched by time, a self that has always been enough, a self that has always been whole, a self that has never stopped loving you. So tonight, before you fall asleep, I want to leave you with one final question. If no one expected anything from you, if fear no longer controlled your choices, if the world forgot your name, who would you be? And if the answer arrives not as words, but as a feeling, a memory, a quiet sense of recognition deep within your heart, do not ignore it. Sit with it, listen to it, trust it, because it may be the voice of the person you have been searching for your entire life. The person you were before the world defined you. The person you forgot. The person you never truly lost. And if this message found you at the exact moment you needed to hear it, perhaps it is not a coincidence. Perhaps your soul is simply ready to remember. If these ancient whispers from the Vedas touched something within you, let us know in the comments. Who do you think you were before the world told you who to be? And if you are walking this path of remembrance with us, subscribe to the Silent Vedas and become part of this journey back to the truth that lives within. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourself, be patient with your becoming, and remember, You are not here to become someone worthy of love. You are here to remember that beneath every fear, every mask, and every story, you have been worthy all along. Sleep peacefully, breathe deeply, and come home to yourself, because the soul never forgets the way back.